बस ठीक है। जब हम अभी अभी आप ऑफ कर देना, अभी आप ऑफ कर।
So, I'm going to welcome all of you for this lecture of acid-base balance and disorders. I'm Dr. Fatma Jamal. I'm mentor for your AKP examinations. And today's lecture is that on the acid-base disorder. So, my focus for this lecture is that this is going to make you understand not only the theoretical standpoint, but also how you can learn from this and apply in an exam oriented perspective and solve your exam oriented questions. So this is the basic goal for this exam, for this lecture. Obviously, the thing is that you guys are very well aware about the acid base balance and disorders. This is like the most easiest thing you have learned in final year, fourth year, third year. But what my goal for this lecture is that to make you understand how to apply this onto the pediatric disorders, which usually present with the acid base balance errors. So that is what my focus will be with you guys, and we will learn about small disorders that are usually come up as an exam question. So you would be able to identify those disorder based on the acid base balance of the particular disorder. Okay, so we are going to start our lecture. So acid base balance and disorders, initially we have to understand what is normal to normal acid base balance. Obviously, we all know that pH is 7.35 to 7.45. This is the normal pH. This is the pH that body is always trying to maintain. PaCO2 in normal value is 35 to 45. Bicarb is 22 to 26. Some books says it is 24 to 28, but we are going to stick with the 22 to 26 value. And base excess. So usually there is a common misperception, or we don't understand what base excess exactly is. So base excess basically, if I'm going to simplify this for you and I'm trying to make you understand, this is the amount of acid, strong acid or strong base that we are going to add into the liter of a blood so that we could return the pH towards the normal. For example, the normal value for base excess is -2 to +2. So when a child presents to you and you have this ABGs with there is a pH of 7.3, 7.3 and base excess of -10, what it is indicating is that there is a lot of acid inside the body. This is a primary metabolic acidosis disorder, and you have to add up a certain base to return the pH towards the normal. Similarly, if the base excess is in a lot of positive value like +10 or +12 or +11, what it indicates is that there is a lots of base inside the body and you have to add up a strong acid in the blood to make the pH normal again. So when we are not able to pick up a disorder from the particularly arterial blood gas, we have to look at the base excess to realize where is it falling into the -2 range or plus range to identify whether this is acidosis or alkalosis. So that is the basic role of base excess in here. And then we have partial PaO2, that is 80 to 100. Usually they don't give PaO2 in your arterial base questions, but you need to memorize the normal value for PaO2, 80 to 100 millimeter of mercury. Now, talking about acid base balance disorder, we have to realize that there is a normal thing inside the body that we call homeostasis. And what homeostasis does is that the whole function of the body is to bring what is normal. So whenever anything changes inside the body, what body immediately does is that it start working towards that thing so that it has to bring it back towards the normal. Similarly, whenever there is a pH change inside the body, there are certain mechanisms inside our body which are working continuously to keep the pH towards the normal range. What is the immediate one of them? That is buffer system, bicarbonate buffer, which is a really specific and main buffer, and this is the only buffer that is going to help you out throughout your equations of the acid base balance disorder. So memorize this equation, and I really want you to keep this equation in your mind because this equation is going to help you a lot. Carbon dioxide plus water, it's an interchangeable reaction. It forms proton and bicarb, and then proton and bicarb mix up together to form carbon dioxide in the water. Other buffer system, we have proteins and phosphate. So protein and phosphate, these are intracellular buffers. So whenever there is a change inside the pH, in intracellularly, proteins are going to release the proton, and it's going to bind the hemoglobin to obviously counter the acid. Similarly, a phosphate is going to act at the level of the lung to release the PCO2. Then, when the immediate mechanism fails to keep the pH normal, we have a respiratory control, and then in the end, we have a renal control. In respiratory control, what happens is that lung regulate PaCO2 by changing the ventilation. For example, let me draw this up for you guys to understand. Okay, so child comes up, his pH is, for example, 7.2. Okay, so his pH is 7.2. Obviously, when we see the pH that is below 7.35, we know this is acidosis. Now we have to identify what kind of acidosis it is. So for instance, his pH is 7.2 and his bicarb is 20. So pH is less, bicarb is less. We are understanding that this is metabolic acidosis. So what happens is that understanding this equation that we did the bicarbonate buffer one, whenever there is a decrease in bicarb, what happens is that the body tries to compensate it. What the body does is that decrease in bicarb will indirectly there is an increase in the protons in the body. So to manage the whole thing, the body will start hyperventilating and washing out of the CO2 occurs. To make it more simplified, let us see what pH is actually equal to. pH is equal to bicarb divided by carbon dioxide. Okay. So if bicarb is decreasing, your pH will ultimately decrease. And if carbon dioxide is decreasing, your pH will increase. So this is PCO2. This works really bad. Okay. So what happens is that whenever your bicarb is decreasing, your pH is ultimately decreasing. So to compensate the decrease in the pH and to return it back to a normal, your PCO2 will also decrease. There is an interchangeable indirect relationship. When PO2 decrease, pH increase. So this is how it's going to maintain your normal pH inside the body. Similarly, when the ventilation falls, PCO2 increase and pH falls. It happens in the respiratory acidosis. In the end, when both of these buffer system fails, there is a renal control, which usually take up hours to days. So what happens is that whenever body detects that if there is a the kidney will regulate bicarb. If the kidney is losing the protons, it will start reabsorbing the proton. In the case of, for instance, we are talking about metabolic acidosis. Let us take this example. What happens is that whenever there is a pH is going to decrease, the bicarb is also decreasing. There is a raise in the PCO2. For instance, the pH is decreasing and PCO2 is rising. So this is respiratory acidosis. What happens in the respiratory acidosis is that there is a compensatory reabsorption of bicarb, so the body will try to increase the base inside the body to keep the pH towards the normal. This is what happens in the renal control, and it will take hours to days. Let's talk about our main disorders. Wait a second, it's not moving. Okay, wait a second. So now the thing I really want you to understand is that in body there is continuously acid is being produced and continuously base is being produced. So still when we are working, we are normally moving, we don't have acidosis, we don't have alkalosis. Why is that happening? Because we have these buffer mechanisms which are constantly working towards keeping the pH normal. So pH 7.35, 7.45 always stays the normal despite lots of acid being produced inside our body because of the physiological mechanism that is happening. What happens to normal ratio inside the body to bicarb to CO2 is 20:1, and it always stays the same. Whenever there is a difference in this ratio, it results in either acidosis or alkalosis. Now let's talk about our thing that we are going to study, that we have to focus. Metabolic acidosis. Whenever your pH is less than 7.35, that is acidosis. And if the bicarb is simultaneously falling less than 22 millimole mercury, that is metabolic acidosis. So whenever metabolic acidosis is occurring, the lungs are going to start compensating by blowing off the CO2 and hyperventilation occur. So now I want you to understand this thing. Hyperventilation Winter's formula for expected. So what happens is that, for example, we are taking this example that pH is 7.2, bicarb is 20. Okay, and the PCO2 for this child is, for example, the PCO2 is also 20. So by winter formula, what we do is that we see how much of a expected PCO2 should be there for this compensation. For instance, if you are calculating this, calculate this, then what happens is that your bicarbonate is 20, multiply it by 1.5, okay, 30. So 30 plus 8 would be 38, okay, and plus minus 2. So 38 minus 2 would be 38 minus 2 would minus 2 would be 36, and 38 plus 2 would be 40. So the expected range for the PCO2 has to be somewhere around 36 to 40. So here your PCO2 range was, for instance, 20. So that means it is falling down the expected range of PCO2. So what happens if it is falling down the expected range for PCO2? If it is falling down the expected range of PCO2, there is an additional respiratory alkalosis going on. So you will understand that there are two kind of acid-base disorder going on. For instance, if it is falling in the range of 36 to 40, so that means that measured PO2 is equal to the expected appropriate respiratory compensation. This is the this is something that we are expecting. What if it is more than the expected? What if it was 45? That means there is an additional respiratory acidosis also going on. So certain times in AKP, what happens is that they ask about mixed acid-base balance disorders. So in mixed acid-base balance disorders, if you are not understanding what is the primary disorder going on, if it is a single disorder or if it is a mixed disorder, what you have to look at is that calculate the PaCO2. If the PaCO2 is within the expected range, that means this is metabolic acidosis with the respiratory compensation. For instance, if it is more than the expected range, that means there is metabolic acidosis with concurrent respiratory acidosis. And if it is less than expected, that means there is metabolic acidosis with concurrent respiratory alkalosis. This is what we mean by the compensation in metabolic acidosis. Another thing I really want you to understand is anion gap. So let's talk about anion gap. How do we measure anion gap? We measure anion gap, we say the sodium minus chloride plus bicarb. This is the formula for the anion gap, okay? The normal anion gap is somewhere around 10 to 12. And this is something that body achieve to keep it towards the normal, sodium minus chloride plus bicarb. In metabolic acidosis, we have two kind of things. Either it is an high anion gap metabolic acidosis, either it is a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Why do we call it high anion gap metabolic acidosis? What is happening inside the body that is resulting in high anion gap? So understand this thing. In our body, there are certain ions. There is a sodium, there is chloride, there is bicarb, and also there are certain acid inside the body that we call organic acids. So in high anion gap metabolic acidosis, what happens is that there is certain disorder that the organic acid inside the body keep on rising. Whenever organic acids inside the body keep on rising, what happens is that they have a plus proton with them. So what they do is that because they have the plus proton, and if we remember the initial equation, that is proton plus bicarb will result in CO2 and water, this proton will keep on going and binding bicarb. So when the proton will keep on going and binding bicarb, what happens? There is a depletion of bicarb inside the body. The bicarb decrease. So whenever bicarb decrease, what happens? The pH falls because we have understood that pH is equal to bicarb divided by PCO2. So whenever bicarb depletes, pH falls. So this is causing metabolic acidosis. Now we are saying this is high anion gap. Why? Because these organic acids will keep on increasing in the body, and these are the organic acid which will keep on the depletion of the bicarb will occur. When we are totally calculating this equation, what happens is that it will result in more than 12 to 25. Whenever it is more than 12, we call it high anion gap, and the basic reason behind it is that there is an increased amount of organic acid inside the body. Take the example of high anion gap, and let us understand this one, DKA. We all know about diabetic ketoacidosis. We all know there is an insulin insufficiency in type 1 diabetes mellitus. So what happens in the state of fasting? The fat is started to break down and there is increase in the ketones inside the body, and they are going to produce alpha hydroxybutyric acid. So what happens when this alpha hydroxybutyric acid is being produced? It is going to bind the bicarb. Whenever it is going to bind the bicarb, it's going to decrease or deplete the bicarb inside the body. So usually what happens in emergency, you will see a child who is presenting with severe metabolic acidosis, and whenever you are calculating the anion gap, it is always high in ion gap. And then what else that you see in this particular child is that the kind of breathing this child have, we call it like SE ketone fruity breath, but it is a deep breathing. What is happening is that whenever the bicarb is decreasing, the body is compensating by washing out the CO2 inside the body. So this is a compensatory mechanism. So that is what causes high anion gap. But why high anion gap is not occurring in normal anion gap metabolic acidosis? So see, in normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, the bicarb is being lost by two major pathways. Either it is being lost in the gut in the form of loose stools, or either it is from the either it is being lost from the kidneys. That is what happened in renal tubular acidosis. There is an absorption defect. The kidneys are not being able to absorb the bicarb. So, because it is being lost because of the either renal tubular acidosis or either in the form of diarrhea, that is why there is increase in the chloride in the body. And whenever there is an increase in the chloride, the overall anion gap stays the normal. Okay. What else we have to understand about this? We have to understand something else, that is, when are we going to call it? Either it is a primary compensated metabolic, partially compensated or fully compensated. So, if you're talking about partially compensated or fully compensated, for instance, a child come up in the hospital and we see the pH is 7.35. Okay, that is normal. But when you see bicarb, the bicarb is 10, and then you look at PCO2, and PCO2 is 15, but pH is 7.35. So, what do we call it? We call it fully compensated metabolic acidosis. Why? Because bicarb is decreasing and PCO2 is also decreasing. Both of them are decreasing to keep the pH towards normal, and they have been successful in keeping the pH normal. So this is fully compensated metabolic acidosis. But if the PCO2 is 20 and bicarb is 10 and pH is also 7.25, so what do we call it? We call it partially compensated. The body has started the compensating mechanism, but they're not being able to bring the pH towards the normal. So that is why we call it partially compensated. But what if pH is 7.2, bicarb is 25, and PCO2 is 45? This is acidosis, but it is not fully compensated. So we will look at the value which is really decreased. In this case, if it is bicarb that is decreasing, that means non-compensated metabolic acidosis. So if you've understood this, I have an MCQ for you to understand this clearly. And I want you to read this. And this is the easiest one. This is something that usually comes up in the AKP setting. So I want you to read this. A 12-year-old boy presents with vomiting, abdominal pain, and deep and rapid breathing. When you see the labs, the glucose is 520, the sodium is 132, potassium is 5.5, chloride is 95, and your bicarb is 10 MEQ. You see the ABG, your pH is 7.1, and your PCO2 is 20. So what I want you to understand, initially, number one, what is this condition? What is happening inside the body? What is this condition? Uh, I really want you guys, what you is if either you can just raise your hands. Yes, Dr. Shazia, Dr. Maha, very good. This is DKA, okay? Because the glucose is in like up the roof. His pH is also decreasing. His bicarb is also decreasing. So we can see that It is DKA. You have identified the condition. Now, what is the primary acid-base disturbance that is happening inside the body? So, what could be the answer? So, we learned about the formula for calculating the anion gap, and we said that it is sodium minus chloride plus bicarb. So whenever sodium plus minus chloride plus bicarb 95 plus 10 and minus it from 132, so that is 27. This is metabolic acidosis, high anion gap metabolic acidosis that is usually occurring in DKA. Now understand what is the causes of non-anion gap metabolic acidosis. Now what happens is that I'm bringing this up because in AKP May 2025 exam, we had 5 to 7 MCQs regarding this particular scenario about the acid-base balance disorder. So what happens is that in normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, the causes either could be because of the GI loss, diarrhea is happening, vomiting is happening, there is an enterostomy, fistula, and the proton ion is being lost inside from the body, or bicarb is being lost inside the body. And in type 1 RTA, also bicarb is being lost inside the body. Now understand something about RTA because this comes up a lot, the renal tubular acidosis, and we are going to discuss this in upcoming lectures on renal. So what happens in RTA is that there is a primary disorder either in the proximal tubule of the nephron or either in the distal tubule of the nephron. So what happens? The nephrons are not able to absorb any of the electrolyte. No, in proximal they can't absorb potassium, bicarb, proton, and certain other electrolytes. But in distal one, the major problem lies with absorption of the bicarb. So whenever you have the MCQ where you have a child who is coming up with the metabolic acidosis, and they say that if a 6-month-old child present to you or 3-year-old child presents to you and he is not thriving, he's failure to thrive, he's also having vomiting, and there is a history of polyuria, there is a history of renal stones. So you look at the pH, it is 7.3, 7.2, and then you look at the bicarb, it's also 10, and you realize that, okay, this is metabolic acidosis going on, and also the features are suggestive of RTA. So then you can diagnose that this is renal tubular acidosis, proximal or distal, depending upon what electrolyte abnormality a child is presenting us with. Other than that, in if the child is having ileostomy or uteroenterostomy, in all of these things, there is a constant loss of acid from the body, which is causing metabolic acidosis. What really occurs in high anion gap metabolic acidosis, what I want you to do is that you can't remember all of these causes. So I really want you to understand, remember only those causes which are very much related to the pediatrics. So diabetic ketoacidosis, we learned that in the body there is increased amount of organic acids that is causing metabolic acidosis. What other thing I really want you to memorize is inborn error of metabolism. So inborn error of metabolism, for instance, if it is organic acidemias, already there is a lot of organic acid inside the body, and usually these children, whenever we will be doing our lecture on inborn error of metabolisms, always and always these children present with either being failure to thrive and also having metabolic acidosis. And most of the time, not most of the time, always the metabolic acidosis is high in iron gap metabolic acidosis. So these are few causes I really want you to remember uh, as per your examination: the inborn error of metabolism, your diabetic ketoacidosis, your starvation ketoacidosis, and ingestion poisonings. Now, let us come to metabolic alkalosis. So, in acidosis, we understood that pH is decreasing less than 7.35, bicarb is also decreasing, and compensatory mechanism is occurring inside the body, and CO2 is also decreasing to keep the pH towards the normal. Complete opposite of that is happening in metabolic alkalosis. So in alkalosis, understand what happened is that there is increased base inside the body. So bicarb is increasing inside the body, and whenever bicarb increase, if we remember pH is equal to bicarb divided by CO2, bicarb increases, it will directly increase the pH inside the body. So in compensation, what lungs do is that they will start hypoventilating and retaining the CO2. So normally, whenever there is, we are trying to look for compensation for every rise of 0.7 millimeter of mercury, for every 1 millimeter, 1 millimole per liter rise in bicarb, 0.7 millimeter of mercury PCO2 rises. This happens in acute setting. In chronic, this could be more, like 2 millimeter, it could be towards 1 millimeter of mercury. So why metabolic alkalosis is occurring? Understand that metabolic alkalosis is occurring because the body is losing the proton ion. So whenever child presents with a persistent vomiting, or if there is an ingestion of diuretics like loop diuretics, what happens in the loop diuretics, it acts towards the, if we remember the pretty nephron that we have seen, please don't just mind my drawing. This is really poor. Let me make you understand this. So this is your nephron, a very ugly one. Okay. So if you're talking about diuretics and how diuretic causes metabolic alkalosis, understand that loop or thiazide diuretic, they act on either thick limb of loop of Henle or thin limb of loop of Henle, and they are acting on the sodium potassium pump. Okay. What else they are doing? We give diuretic because we are trying to lose the volume of fluid from the body. Okay, so the volume of fluid is being lost inside the body, and also the body is trying to compensating by secreting the iron. So whenever it is acting on these channels, what happens is that number one, the volume is being lost. Number two, it will act upon these channels, and it will, what will they will do? They will exchange the bicarb, like because of the losing of the volume of the blood, the proton is also being lost inside the loop of Henle. It is not being reabsorbed by the appropriate sodium potassium pumps, and that is why, because of proton is being lost inside the urine, the pH is rising, the bicarb is also rising inside the body. Okay. In vomiting, proton is also being lost in from the GI tract. In hyperaldosteronism, what is occurring? There is an increased level of aldosterone, and aldosterone is causing sodium and water retention. So it is acting on sodium, potassium, and the pump, sodium potassium pump. And in exchange for the potassium, the proton is being lost inside the urine. So that is what is causing metabolic alkalosis. What else is a pediatric condition that I would really want you to remember in metabolic alkalosis? There are two conditions that I want you to memorize with metabolic alkalosis, because every time if alkalosis is coming up in pediatrics, these two condition has to be in your mind. And these are not these conditions, these are in other ones. So let's see if you can diagnose that one particular condition. Okay, this is not. Let's just understand the causes for this. No, let's just go towards the MCQs and then we will understand the causes for this. So, there is a child, 4 week old male infant, who is presenting with progressive projectile non bilious vomiting for 7 days. You come up, you examine the child, you see he is irritable, he is severely dehydrated, and you can see a palpable mass in the epigastrium. When you see the laboratory findings, you find that ABG is 7.58. That means the ABG is increased. This is alkalosis. You see the PaCO2, it is 52 millimeter of mercury. Again, PaCO2 is increased. So this is the compensatory mechanism that is going on. And you look at the bicarb, it is also increased. So you do realize this is metabolic alkalosis that is going on. And you see the base excess. Remember, base excess we talk about, either it could be -2 or either it could be +2. So whenever it is in the positive, we have to remember that the basic disorder that is going on inside the body is alkalosis. So this is what alkalosis, you can identify metabolic alkalosis. What is this condition metabolic alkalosis is occurring in? If anyone can just diagnose this condition. Yes, it is pyloric stenosis. Very good. So, infantile hypertrophic pyloric stenosis, just memorize this condition. What happens is that there is a pyloric dysfunction, the valvular dysfunction. So, usually, what happens is that these infants present with projectile vomiting because they are persistently projectile vomiting. The acid is being lost from their body in the form of vomit. What else is being lost in the form of also along with acid? Potassium ion. So they are always hypokalemic. They are always the electrolytes are being lost, the acid is being lost. They present with the primary disorder of being metabolic alkalosis. What could be done for these children? If you can't answer, it's fine, but I just really want you to understand how the questions present. So, if the child presents with hypertrophic pyloric stenosis, what is the immediate management that we have to do? What could be the answer for this thing? Anyone, just any option will work. So see, we have diagnosed that this child is presenting with the pyloric stenosis. Obviously, we just diagnosed it. The option one is rapid IV infusion of half normal saline with potassium supplementation, and then you have to just rush the child towards pylorotomy. You don't do that. The surgeon won't be performing any surgery if there is an electrolyte imbalance. Okay. So, what initially you have to do is that you have to correct the electrolyte imbalance, you have to manage the conditions medically. And when all the electrolyte imbalance is being corrected, then they decide whether they have to proceed with the surgery or they are going to manage conservatively the stenosis of this child. Okay. So the option will be B. Number one, you have to identify the condition, you have to correct the ABC protocol. According to ABC protocol, you have to correct the immediate dangers that are happening, and afterwards you go for a more permanent solution. That is very, very good, Dr. Maha. We have another condition. Okay. Now I want you to go through this and diagnose what this condition is, because this is also a favorite MCQs that always come up in AKP exam. So you have a 6-year-old boy who is evaluated for the polyuria, polydipsia. He is failure to thrive. He has a growth failure. He has no history of vomiting, but he does end up presenting to you with pH of 7.50, bicarb of 36, PaCO2 of 48. And you look at the serum electrolytes, the sodium is 132, the potassium is 2.7, and chloride is 86. When you see the urinary electrolytes, you look at high urinary chloride excretion despite hypochloremia. You do the renal ultrasound, you find nephrocalcinosis. So all of this thing, what is it pointing towards? What condition are we talking about here? Anything? RTA is a very close differential for this condition. But think about something else. We talked about RTA. Just right now, we discussed renal tubular acidosis, and we did talk about that in RTA, there is a non high anion gap metabolic acidosis. What is this particular condition? There is a metabolic alkalosis going on. Very good, doctor. This is Bartter syndrome. So, understand, in alkalosis, always remember two conditions in pediatric population. They usually come up with failure to thrive. Barter is very similar to RTA, but what happens inside the barter, it is like a condition where there is a defect of sodium potassium 2 chloride transporter. So whenever there is a defect of this particular pump, the patient presents with salt wasting. So they have low sodium. They present with potassium wasting because it is not being absorbed because the pump is defective. What else happen is that the proton is also lost inside the body. And usually, when you look at the history, you take the history there, then the mother give you history of polyhydramnios, and in children, you notice a significant polyuria, polydipsia. So, what could be the management for Bartter syndrome? What is the management? What should we do? Should we treat them with magnesium and thiazide diuretic? Should we give them NSAIDs? Should we treat with spironolactone or proton pump inhibitors? And one more thing. This is not just, this is something you just I'm just throwing it out here. Very similar to Bartter syndrome, the other condition that we have is Gentleman syndrome. So they both come interchangeably and they are both very similar. So how do we differentiate between Gentleman and Bartter? We usually differentiate on the basis of magnesium. Exactly. Very good. So in Gentleman, what usually happen is hypomagnesemia, but in Bartter you do not have hypomagnesemia. Rest all of the condition is very similar. So if there is no magnesium, always think of Bartter first. If it is associated with hypomagnesemia, just go for Gentleman. Okay. In Bartter syndrome, we do not have a particular management for this particular treatment for this condition, but we do manage it medically by giving them either potassium supplementation. We also give them spironolactone. If we are trying to provide we are trying to prevent hypokalemia, we give them sparing diuretics, but usually we give them NSAIDs, indomethacin. What indomethacin does inside the body is that it decreases the prostaglandin production, and it improves the growth and electrolyte imbalance. So that is why we give indomethacin in barter. Okay, now let's talk about metabolic alkalosis causes. So in causes of metabolic alkalosis, understand that you have GI tract, either from the GI tract, either from the kidneys. In GI tract, it will be loss in the form of vomiting if there is a persistent NG aspiration, and in the form of gastroplasty or anything else, the acid is being lost. Kidneys, if there is a defect like Bartter syndrome or Gentleman syndrome, it is going to cause. Then we have hyperaldosteronism. Again, we talked about hyperaldosteronism. What hyperaldosteronism is, that is it doing the sodium water retention and acting on the pump, and that is why in exchange for potassium we are losing the proton, the acid from the body. Other than that, we have miscellaneous the base loading in presence of low GFR, like milk alkali syndrome. In the end stage renal disease, this happens. In miscellaneous, you have like in citrate blood transfusions. Usually, where what happens is that when there is a massive blood transfusion, that also end up the child also end up having metabolic alkalosis. Let's talk about respiratory acidosis, and this is like a very important one if you're particularly working in a tertiary care hospital. So, what happens in respiratory acidosis? Again, we did understand what is acidosis. Acidosis is when the pH is less than 7.35. We call it respiratory acidosis because there is a raise in partial pressure of carbon dioxide more than 45. So when partial pressure of carbon dioxide is rising, there is a decrease in pH. We do identify this is respiratory acidosis that is going on. What happens in the compensation of respiratory acidosis? The kidneys start retaining bicarb. And as we remember, pH is equal to bicarb divided by PaCO2. What the kidney is doing is that kidney is started reabsorption bicarb in hopes of returning the pH towards normal. Okay, because respiratory acidosis, the pH is decreased. So what happens in every there is an increase of 1 millimole for every 10 millimeter mercury rise in PaCO2. So what we do, we see if the primary disorder is respiratory acidosis, then we see if the bicarb is rising compensatory for the CO2 that has been rising inside the body. So in the initial acute stage, there is just a minimal compensation. For example, if we said 22 to 26 is the normal value of bicarb, you will have somewhere around 27 to 28 in acute compensation. But in chronic compensation, when the patient progresses into respiratory acidosis, there is a significant renal compensation, and that is when the patient present to you in the with the pH of 7.1, PaCO2 of more than 45 or 48 or 50, and the bicarb is compensatory rising in the range of 35 or in the range of 36. Okay, so in acute, you will find there is a decrease in pH, there is increase in PaCO2, and minimally bicarb is being raised. But in chronic, what happens is that there is a near normal pH. The PaCO2 rises significantly and bicarb also rises significantly. So I want you to remember or just recall what conditions are there that we usually deal with that end up the children end up having respiratory acidosis. And these are the conditions that we keep on receiving in the emergency, or we keep on receiving in the ward, and then we look at the pH, we are like, oh my god, he's retaining CO2, we have to do immediate intervention. The one condition that you have, like, if there is a neuromuscular disorder, if there is a something is wrong with the brain, for example, there is a stroke, and the respiratory center, the stroke occurred and the respiratory center is destroyed, so the person now does not know how to compensate. So what happens is that the respiratory center is not working, so there is a shallow breathing, and because of the shallow breathing, the CO2 is being retained. Very good. Severe asthma, COPD. In severe asthma, what is happening? In severe asthma, what happens is that your alveoli collapse. They are not opening. They are not relaxed. They are in a state of collapse. So the not much of a gas exchange is occurring at the level of alveoli. So CO2 is keeps on rising inside the body. So you whenever you go for the ABGs, you see CO2 is being rising, and you are giving salbutamol, you are giving magnesium sulfate, hydrocortisone. What primary thing that you are trying to correct is that you are trying to make and you are trying to work on the alveoli relaxation. So when alveoli are relaxing, more gas exchange can occur at the level of alveoli. Other thing, one more condition that I really want you to understand is that we usually end up having, and we usually shift them to pediatric ICU, that is Guillain-Barré syndrome. In Guillain-Barré syndrome, there is a primary nerve defect. Demyelination is occurring. Usually, it progresses in the form of ascending paralysis. So, what happens whenever it reaches towards the level of lungs, your muscles are not working, your respiratory system, your muscles are not contracting poorly. So, these children end up suffering from respiratory acidosis, and that is something that is an indication that you have to give a mechanical ventilation towards to the child. Another condition that respiratory acidosis occur in a late stages, that is ARDS, severe ARDS. In pediatric ARDS, initially what happens is that hypoxemia occur. But as it progresses from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, as it reaches stage 3, what happens? Respiratory acidosis occurring start to occur. So initially, when you see in the acute form, you will notice that there is a minimal rise in bicarb. But when significant respiratory acidosis set in and the child progresses from stage 3, there is a permanent damage to the alveoli. He goes into the chronic form of respiratory acidosis, and then you see PaCO2 is also rising, bicarb is also significantly raised in this child, and that is when you usually know that the prognosis for this child is really poor. What other conditions that I really want you to memorize in pediatric? These are the only conditions that you have to keep in your mind. Other than that, if I'm trying to tell you, then remember in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, also there is a restrictive lung disease is occurring, which will also end up resulting in respiratory acidosis, in neuropathies, in myopathies, also in drug induced. So what happens usually when there is shallow breathing, if the child is presenting in an acute state of shallow breathing, he was breathing just fine and now he just presented, and you notice that there is a respiratory acidosis, always rule out drug and always rule out any ingestion of a foreign body, because if it is responding to an antidote, it is always drug. If it is not responding to an antidote, think about CNS. Okay. Other than that, what happens in pneumothorax, in acute airway obstruction, again, foreign body tumor, always think about in acute settings, always think about either ingestion, either foreign body. Okay. And then in COPD and ventilator induced lung injury, all of these things result in respiratory acidosis. Now, a child is presented to you, a 4-year-old child. He's brought to the emergency department with increasing lethargy and rapid breathing. Okay. So you see, he has a history of severe asthma, and he also had multiple recent exacerbations. So you're examining the child, you see he's drowsy, he's having nasal flaring, intercostal recessions. You go for an EBG immediately. You see the pH is 7.25, PaCO2 is 60, and bicarb is 26. So we can identify this is a respiratory disorder. This is an acute one because bicarb is not significantly rising in this. It is just 26. So we did realize what is happening. So what do we do in this child? Do we give sodium soda bicarb? No, we will not give soda bicarb. There is no indication of giving soda bicarb to correct acidosis and respiratory acidosis. There is actually no indication. Just memorize this. There is no indication. Do we give them high dose diuretics? No. Do we give them go for urgent intubation, or we will observe for CO2 retention? The best possible thing we can do in this condition is that, number one, give oxygen to the child if it is not if he is not already receiving an oxygen, and immediately start treating exacerbation of asthma, because he has a history of asthma. He is presenting with respiratory acidosis. We just discussed the condition respiratory acidosis. What is happening? The pathology is lying at the level of alveoli, and the gas exchange is not occurring. They are not in a state of relaxation. So what we do is that immediately, if you read the guidelines for asthma in pediatric guidelines, what they tell you is that give him the salbutamol puff, 2 puff. If he's not responding, go for duonabs. If he's not responding, give hydrocort. If he's still not responding, give magnesium sulfate. So what we do is that we start immediate interventions. If your child is not responding to any of those interventions, you went for the nebulization, you went for back to back 3 times nebulization, you gave him duonabs, you administered hydrocortisone, went for magnesium sulfate, IV magnesium sulfate, and then you realized nothing is working. Then you went for terbutaline infusion in this child. Is still there is a persistently wheezy chest, and still he is retaining carbon dioxide. That is when you decide that this child is not responding towards your medication. That is an indication that you have to put this child to on mechanical ventilation. So, and then relax his respiratory muscles and then treat it. Okay. Memorize this one for the respiratory acidosis cause. So let me ask you this thing. If the child is presenting and you see the ABG, there is 7.25 pH, PaCO2 is 40, no, PaCO2 is 50, and bicarb is 25. What kind of acid-base disorder is this? We know respiratory acidosis. What I'm trying to ask, is it fully compensated, partially compensated, or not compensated? So you have pH of 7.25, PaCO2 of 50, and bicarb of 25. So see, uh, understand this thing. The pH is still on the lower side, 7.25. The PaCO2 is rising. So you did understand this is respiratory acidosis. But the bicarb is in the normal range. So that means there is no compensation occurring inside this child right now. If he presented with the pH of 7.25, you had uh, PaCO2 of 50, and the bicarb is also rising, in it is rising towards the 30. So now you do realize that pH is less than 7.25. PaCO2 is rising, but bicarb is also compensatory rising. So that means this is partially compensated. For instance, your pH is 7.35, your PaCO2 is 70, and your bicarb is 35. That means full compensation has occurred. Both of them has increased in the number to keep the pH towards normal, and they have successfully kept the pH normal. So this is full compensation. Understand, there is no overcompensation. Okay, this is something I really want you to understand. The both mechanisms can bring the pH to the normal, but they cannot overcorrect the pH. So it will be partially compensated or fully compensated. There is no overcompensation. Okay. Then respiratory alkalosis. So in the range of acid based disorders, if I'm going to like triage this is like the least important one, but either you have to remember this, because there is one certain pediatric condition which present with respiratory alkalosis, and that is also an exam question. So that is why you have to understand this. In respiratory alkalosis, what happens? Your pH is more than 7.45. 7.45 pH more than 7.45, that is alkalosis. Your PaCO2 is less than 35. In compensation, what kidney is doing, when kidney notice that pH is rising continuously, so it start excreting the bicarb in order to bring back pH towards normal. Okay. So for every 10 millimeter fall in PaCO2, 2 millimole of bicarb keep on decreasing in acute setting. In chronic setting, it decreases 4 millimole per liter. So in ABG, you will find that pH is increased, PaCO2 is decreased, bicarb is decreased. So you do realize that, okay, fine, this is respiratory alkalosis that is happening. Usually, when what do we do is that we get confused in respiratory alkalosis and metabolic acidosis, because but the major disorder is pH is being decreases. Certain time they do present with the mixed disorder. So if pH is increasing, PaCO2 is decreasing, bicarb is decreasing, that is respiratory alkalosis. Now, if you could recall just one condition that children do present with respiratory alkalosis, and we have to be really vigilant for that one condition. If is there anything that you could recall in pediatric cases, one condition that children are usually presenting with respiratory alkalosis, hyperventilating children, they end up in the emergency. Like for example, a five no, s- for example, a 1 month old child is presenting to you and he's hyperventilating. The mom says that he's really lethargic, he is having hypoglycemia, he is hypotonic. You do realize he is very low birth weight baby and he's hyperventilating, and there is also a complaint of seizures. What is that one thing that could come up in your mind? And he's like really little child. So see, if this condition happen, remember there is a disorder in pediatric that do present with hyperventilation, and that is something we call urea cycle defects. So what happens in urea cycle defect? There is ammonemia. The ammonia level rises in the body. So these children present with persistent vomiting. These children present with hyperventilation. These children are failure to thrive. They are hypotonic. They do have the complaint of poor feeding. And then when you look at the ABG, you will find respiratory alkalosis because ammonia crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it causes a significant impact onto the brain, which then brain start to uh, compensate by hyperventilating and trying to clear it out. Okay. So urea cycle defect in respiratory alkalosis, you have to memorize. This is the only condition that I really want you to understand in respiratory alkalosis. What other causes of respiratory alkalosis could there be? Uh, the common causes we are trying to discuss, then in respiratory alkalosis, it could be because of anxiety. Usually in anxiety disorder, the children do end up presenting with hyperventilation. And in salicylate overdose, the children do present with hyperventilation and respiratory alkalosis. Other thing that happens in pneumonia, in certain time pneumonia, what happens, there is a tachypnea. So in because of increase in the respiratory rate, what happens, the CO2 starts to wash out from the body, which end up causing the respiratory alkalosis. What other thing is that this excessive mechanical or non-invasive ventilation. So what happens is that in when we are keeping the children on ventilator, so we have a control of setting the rate for the child. So we are in control whether we are giving him 30 breaths, whether we are giving him 40 breaths, whether we are giving him 50 breaths. Okay. So if a child is like 5 months old and you have set the rate on the 60 breaths and you are observing an ABG and you see respiratory alkalosis and he's on the mechanical ventilator, that means you are giving him way too many breaths, and that is causing the washout of carbon dioxide inside the body. So that is an indication that you have to adjust the rate on the ventilator. That is why it is written in respiratory disorder, excessive mechanical ventilation also causes respiratory alkalosis. Again, in certain times, this was the MCQs that came up in, I guess, FOP or TAS, and also it came up in FCPS Part 1 examination in Pakistan. Usually, what happens is that they give that a child came in with severe tachypnea, the child is hyperventilating, and then you notice that there is a perioral tingling sensation that is occurring inside the child. So he does complain of perioral tingling sensation. So if I am going to tell you why this happens, so understand this thing. In respiratory alkalosis, what is happening? The CO2 is being washed out. Then body is like excreting the bicarb, and the proton is rising inside the body. So when proton is rising inside the body, it will go and bind the albumin inside the body. We also know that the calcium, there are two kind of calcium. There is an bound calcium and then there is a free ionized calcium. What happens when protons start to bind with the albumin? So there is less albumin remaining inside the body to bind with the calcium. So what happens? There is overall decrease in the calcium. That is why the children present with these complaints of perioral oral tingling sensations. Either they will have like tetany like muscle spasms, or they could also present with chavistic signs. So you usually the answer used to be that give them a bag where they will start breathing. And what happens is that the primary thing that you are trying to correct is that you ask them to inhale and exhale in the bag, because you want them to inhale the carbon dioxide that they are exhaling, simultaneously correcting the error. Okay. So for this, there is this one MCQs that I really want you to understand. This. So let us go through first this one. Respiratory alkalosis is occurring inside the body. The initial thing that we will look at is that what is the condition of a bicarbonate. If the bicarbonate is decreased, yes, the metabolic compensation is occurring. If the bicarb is not decreased, that means there is a mixed acid base disorder that is happening. For example, metabolic disorder with respiratory alkalosis. If the bicarb is decreased, metabolic compensation is occurring. You have to look at whether it is acute respiratory alkalosis or chronic. In acute, there will be bicarb will decrease by 0.25 milliequivalent per 1 millimeter rise in decrease in PaCO2. In chronic, it will be 0.55 milliequivalent per liter. So how do we treat respiratory alkalosis? What do is that if there is hypoxemia, we will correct the hypoxemia. If it is because of the anxiety, then we will teach the children maneuver to correct it. If it is because of the drugs, then we have to remove the drugs. If it is because of the ammonia cycle defects, because urea cycle defect that the child is presenting, and you see he is having respiratory alkalosis, what do you do is that you correct the error. You give him certain drugs that will decrease the level of ammonia inside his body. Okay. So we end up giving them we do give them sodium benzoate, because it does bind ammonia inside the body, and we are trying to clear out the ammonia from the body. So we are trying to correct the hyperventilation of this child, the tachypnea of this child. In mechanical ventilation, you have to reduce the respiratory rate, and if it is because of the pain, then you have to treat the pain. So you have to simultaneously correct the cause to treat the respiratory alkalosis. Let's talk about this. A 12-year-old girl presents with fever, chest pain, and rapid breathing. You notice she is really anxious, she is tachypnic, her respiratory rate is 40. In ABGs, you find 7.5 pH, PaCO2 is 28, and bicarb is 23. So, initially, tell me what kind of acid base disorder is this? Is it fully compensated? Is it partially compensated? What is happening here? You see pH is 7.5. You see PaCO2 is 28. You see bicarb is 23. So we did realize this is respiratory alkalosis. What kind? Full compensation, partial compensation, or no compensation? Basically this is the, if we are taking by on the face value, this is like no compensation is occurring, because PaCO2 is less, pH is more than 7.45, and the body has started to compensate, yet the mechanism is not started, because bicarb is still in the normal range but lower side, 22 to 26 if we are taking normal, 23 is the bicarb. So yes, compensation has not been started yet, so this is not compensated metabolic respiratory alkalosis. So in this child who presented to you with this, what is something that we have to do in this child? Will we give him intravenous sodium bicarb to correct the alkalosis? Will we intubate the child, administer loop diuretics, or we will just observe, or we will treat the underlying cause infection? What could be the answer of this MCQ? Yes. So see, this is an anxious girl. Okay, there is a primary defect that the MCQ is telling you, that there is a fever, chest pain, rapid breathing. She did present with fever, chest pain. This could be because of the pneumonia, or this could be because the child is just having an anxiety attack. So number one, initially you have to reassure the child, also the parents, and then you have to rule out whether it is because of the pneumonia or any infection, or is it because of the anxiety. Is it because, if it is because of the pneumonia, and then you look at the saturation of a child, if he is also, the room air saturation is less than 92, you have to administer the oxygen and start the management for the pneumonia. If it is because of the anxiety, then you have to teach the child certain method like breathing inside the bag or something like that to adjust the breathing mechanism of the child and provide him support, with the support that is needed to correct this disorder. So we are actually done with this, but what I really want to go is go back in here and discuss something with you that I just remembered. Metabolic acidosis. Okay. If we do realize, what are the complications that happens in metabolic acidosis? If, and you can actually just tell me a few of them. What is the complications that we usually end up seeing in metabolic acidosis? What happens? Yes, proton is rising. Then what is happening? Scared of? Yes, renal damage is occurring. What else? What else? Is it causing something else that we should be really aware of? If, let's see this, the proton is rising inside the body in acid base balance disorder. This is your proton. This is rising. Your bicarb is decreasing. When your pH is significantly less, for example, your pH is less than 7.15 or 7.1, what happens is that this protons, it goes up towards the cardiac muscles and it act on the cardiac muscle. So what happens is that when it act on the myocardial muscles, it actually decrease the contractility of the cardiac muscle. So if you could recall what happens when the child in severe DKA presents, like severe DKA, when the pH is less than 7.15 or pH is less than 7.1, what happens? These children present in a state of dehydration. They have very poor pulse perfusion. If you check the pulse, it could be because of the dehydration, but it could also be because there is a significantly raised proton inside the body, which is affecting the myocardium. It is causing the poor myocardial contractility. So there is not much of a perfusion left inside the body. So usually what we do is that we receive the child, we are like, give him the bolus of 20 ml per kg. We could also go for like one bolus, two bolus, because we are trying to improve, give fluid to correct the dehydration, also correct the hypovolemia that is being caused because of the decreased contractility, myocardial contractility. What else we do is that certain times it's not improving, we go for ionotropic support because we have to improve the cardiac contractility. Usually we say that because there is poor perfusion because of acidosis. So the acidosis, what occurs in high proton is acting on the myocardium, and it is causing decreased perfusion. This is one complication. Other complication, what happens, this proton goes on the chemoreceptors inside the lungs, and it triggered the chemoreceptor zone, and then the child start hyperventilating, and because of hyperventilating the child start losing all the CO2, which again is a danger for the child. What happens when there is a decreased CO2 inside the body? What is that we are very much scared of when the child is losing CO2? Is there any particular thing? Anyone? So see, what happens is that when CO2 in itself is a potent cerebral vasodilator. Okay. So when there is a low CO2, cerebral vasoconstriction occur, and children suffer from, very good, damages like dizziness, confusion, and even syncopal episode occur. Okay. Similarly, what happens when there is a increased CO2 inside the body, that is happening in respiratory acidosis, because CO2 is potent cerebral vasodilator. It dilates the cerebral blood vessels, it causes cerebral edema, and then it increases the intracranial pressure of the child. So child will start having the symptoms of increased intracranial pressure, which I know all of you will be very much aware of, Cushing's triad that happens. So one of the thing that we do in children who are suffering from increased intracranial pressure, apart from giving them mannitol, apart from giving them raising their head and giving them hypertonic saline, what we do is that we do the ambu-bagging, or we put them on the ventilator and cause them to hyperventilate. By hyperventilating, we are trying to remove the excess CO2 from the body, and we are trying to somehow indirectly decrease the raised ICP. So, increase CO2 or decrease CO2, both of them are very toxic towards the brain. So, that is also a complication that you have to remember. Other than that, there is a renal damage that doctor just told us about, that acidosis is causing renal damage. Okay. So, we did discuss the complication of metabolic acidosis. We did discuss the complications of high CO2 and low CO2. So all are all the questions like this? No. So see, in AKP examination, what happens is that usually they give you the acid-base balance disorder, like the disorder we discussed in pyloric stenosis, the disorder we discussed in the Bartter syndrome. They will usually give you the, if there is a hypochloremic metabolic alkalosis, they will usually give you the low calcium and metabolic alkalosis, and then they will ask you about the condition in which this occurs. So you have to remember the particular acid base disorder that is related to that particular condition. Okay, this way you can easily diagnose the condition and you will be very much well aware of. Other than that, they usually ask if it is a fully compensated metabolic acidosis, or if it is a partially compensated, or if there is no compensation. So, if you understand the basic mechanism, what do we call the partial compensation? When do we say full compensation? And when do we say non compensation? You are good to go with these questions. These are very easy to solve. But in pediatric population, the conditions that we just discussed, these are the very main, very important conditions that we do end up that in AKP we do end up with in AKP examination. These are the particular conditions that I really want you to remember. Okay. Next, let me see if there is anything else I could recall. No, we did discuss this. We did discuss this. So, if there is any other question, any other query that you want to ask about any of the things that we have discussed, anything you are not understanding, anything that you're, yes, you will get recordings. These are present, you will find them on our YouTube channel. So, you will get the recording of the lecture. Anything else that you want to understand, anything else that you want to ask? So, no questions? Role of acetazolamide in, wait a minute, let me open this. Wait. Okay, here. So, what is the role of acetazolamide in metabolic acidosis? Very good question. So, acetazolamide is basically a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, if we could recall. So, what is the main effect of acetazolamide? It blocks the reabsorption of the bicarbonate in the proximal tubule. So, because it blocks the resorption of bicarbonate in the proximal tubule, what happens? There is an increased bicarbonate excretion in the urine, and because there is an increased bicarbonate excretion in the urine, it end up causing metabolic acidosis. Okay. Basically, this is something that is acting on the loop of Henle, and it is blocking the resorption of the resorption of the bicarb. We did discuss in the causes of non-metabolic, non-anion gap metabolic disorder that two things can occur in non-anion gap metabolic acidosis. Either we are losing the bicarb from GI tract, or we are losing the bicarb from renal. Remember all these two things. We are losing it in the GI tract in the form of vomiting, in the form of if there is introstomy, fistula, or if there is diarrhea, we are losing it from GIT. If we are not losing it from GIT, we are losing it from kidneys. How are we losing it from kidneys? If someone is taking acetazolamide, it is a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. It is not letting them absorb bicarbonate. If they are taking it in increased amount, the bicarbonate is being lost inside the urine. Because bicarb is being lost inside the urine, it will end up causing metabolic acidosis. Okay. Anything else that you want to ask about the high anion gap or non-anion gap? Any other question that you guys have? Uh, yes. Yes, yes, we can give acetazolamide as a treatment of metabolic alkalosis. That's a very good question. So, in what happens is that in therapeutic use, if you are using acetazolamide, it is usually often used to treat metabolic alkalosis, especially when due to diuretic or in a patient with COPD, chronic hypercapnia, who develop alkalosis from aggressive diuresis. We give them acetazolamide to treat the metabolic alkalosis. So what happens is that it causes the decrease in sodium bicarbonate, and we are trying to bring back pH towards the normal. So yes, we can give acetazolamide in the treatment of metabolic alkalosis by so that we are trying to bring the pH towards the normal. Anything else that you want to ask? Okay. So I'm hoping that you guys this find this really helpful for you, and I really hope that this helps you in your upcoming while solving your past papers or while solving your MCQs. We will be sharing this PDF with you in the group, and we will also be uploading this lecture on the YouTube so that you can have a free access to it. The next lecture, we are going to solve a past paper, that is AKP September 2025 paper. So what we are going to do in that is that we are going to understand how to approach the AKP questions and how to choose the best possible answer to those questions. So we will also be discussing from where the question came and what is the basic understanding behind that questions. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me in today's lecture. Allah Hafiz.